This is just a kind of overview to think about what we've heard, to process it a little bit, put everything together, and then send you off for a glass of wine or a glass of beer or whatever you prefer. So we've got, I hope you don't mind me calling you stalwarts of a market, because you have been in the market for a while, and you've seen the whole market for the last 15 years or so. So you've seen things come and go, and now we're facing a very different world. So if you could just introduce yourselves, each of you, just say a few words about what you do, your history in this region, and then we'll go into a couple of questions. Hadley, starting with you.
Hadley Dean, so been living and working in Poland, Central Eastern Europe for 20 years, and now founded together with 20 people MDC Square, which is a warehouse logistic developer.
Monika Debska-Pastakia, Padma Group. I have been in the region since 1991, so over 30 years, and I've seen the whole transformation process from the very, very beginning. So it's been quite an eye-opening experience, I have to say. So it will be interesting to share certain views where we are today.
Great, thank you, Monika. Marcus.
Marcus Leininger, now a Lux resident, but 97 I made my first trip to Poland. Since then, financed a lot of assets in Central Eastern Europe and in Russia. And now I'm back here.
And also, anytime you would like to ask a question or make a comment, it's a half an hour session, it's not a long one, just to summarize, and if you want to make any points, please feel free. Marcus, you mentioned you were in Russia. When were you in Russia?
Beginning 2000s.
Beginning 2000, for how long?
Until the financial crisis, until 2008.
So you were there for 8 years?
Yes, approximately.
Okay. I mean, no one knew what was going to happen. Did you get a sense of a country which was going in the right direction or the wrong direction, or what were your observations?
From a banking point of view, yes, because the environment has dramatically changed for cross-border lenders in Russia. Unfortunately, we looked into Ukraine, for example. We did one deal and said, okay, no, we can't do business over there. So it was too unstable, to put it in diplomatic words. We couldn't almost not repatriate the money, which these problems we had in other countries not.
Okay. Hadley, let's go to the session we just heard, or any of the afternoon sessions. Is there anything you've heard which has surprised you, or you want to affirm, or you think was missed or misrepresented or something? Any comments on what you just heard?
Well, actually, I was interested in Sabina picking up on the fact of what Marek was talking about in terms of the growth of, let's say, what is going to happen, I think, in Poland. And I would actually just like to reinforce that. So, as many of you will know, my wife is a Finnish diplomat, and she specializes in NATO, and comes from a long line of diplomats. So we have a lot of weird and wonderful people who kind of come to our house. And one of them is a gentleman who actually went into Russia in the early 90s, and he actually logged every single nuclear missile in Russia. And then went to the Pentagon, and then went to NATO, and worked his way up. And they used to disappear off with my wife. I was a little nervous about this. They used to go... They used to go off into like these hotels for a week, and they would war plan. Effectively, all the NATO countries would go in, no comms, and they would have war games planning. And it was pretty clear right from then which way it was coming. And he was a big part in actually positioning NATO pre-Crimea, saying, guys, you need to watch out. The Polish government recently gave him, he was a massive Polish fan because the Poles and him were completely in step with what he saw and what Poland saw. And his viewpoint, and he actually retired as the security director of security policy 3 months ago, and is now in a think tank in Germany. And what he is saying is that we will see 8 US forward bases in Poland. We're going to see 2 British, and we're likely going to see some German ones. And I think what's really interesting here is 2 things, is that the wave of investment that, and this is his view, not mine, that is coming into Poland, from infrastructure to strategic planning to just being that new Western Germany, many people are underestimating. And, I think also when we're looking at this is obviously a great thing for Poland, but also the missed opportunity here is Germany. Germany didn't step up. Germany actually has been, it really has been lagging in its thought process and leadership in Europe on the Ukrainian crisis. And Poland, as Marek, I think, very nicely said, has actually taken a big chunk of that leadership.
Mm-hmm. Marcus, did I hear you say, I'm Austrian? Is that what you just said?
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, no one's blaming you for any government.
Now we know.
And you mean like the German government has missed an opportunity exactly how? Sorry?
Well, they didn't react. If they'd stood up right at the outbreak of the war and said, right, what we're going to do now is we're going to do this, this, and this, and this, and really all they did is they allowed the German government, which was actually a big thing, they just allowed a lot of other governments to forward on weapons. They didn't take a leadership view, and if they don't change that approach quickly, Poland will be the net beneficiary of their lack of leadership in this crisis.
Okay. I mean, this is very macro. I mean, Monica, from your point, what have you heard in today which has come out? And I want to say, because for you, circular economy is very important. And it's really interesting what Richard said, that in Holland, for example, circular economy is mainstream. I know the circular economy group here in Poland, and they are fighting very hard to get circular economy known, but it's not really taken off in Poland, it seems. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. What has been important for you?
Sure. In terms of circular economy, I think it's a new paradigm that is actually coming towards, especially alignment in our part of Europe. It is quite a popular and quite a growing trend in Western Europe, especially in Holland. In real estate, that is really an area which is rapidly developing.
What does it mean in real estate?
That
What does circular economy mean?
What is really the circular economy? It's effectively, if you're looking at the typical definition, is actually the use of building materials for as long as possible, reusing, upcycling, refurbishing, etc., etc. So effectively ensuring that you are not using the new resources, which are finite. So the question is when these new resources, which we are constantly using, will end, because the end will most likely come at some point, and then, from what we hear, we'll probably need 3 planets as opposed to 1 if we carry on with the same pace of use of natural resources. So the question is, okay, what can we do? And the shift from the linear economy, which is take, make, waste, that's what we're actually doing at the moment. And bearing in mind that construction industry is wasting about 30% of global resources, and is all ending up in landfills. That is another area where construction industry really is effectively looking into, especially in countries like Holland, utilizing the existing materials in construction.
What's the worst offender in terms of construction materials which ends up in a landfill?
Well, most, if you're looking at buildings, in fact, in essence, you're looking at demolition rather than decommissioning. So decommissioning means that you are taking the construction materials bit by bit, and ideally, if construction materials have material passports, then of course you can reuse them because you know what they are. And that is also a trend which is rapidly evolving in Europe in general. In Poland, still, at the moment is only sort of like in discussion, but nothing material has happened as yet. So it's a quite a journey to really reach that point where Holland is today.
Okay, Marcus, how about you? What have you heard from today which has made an impression on you, or you want to comment on?
What I see, because I'm sitting on a multiple of boards of institutional investors, is the balancing act to have the requirement to make buildings green. Then you have the information that you get the 10 basis points discount. I'm not sure if this really pays it off. You you cannot increase the rents for the capex you have to do. The technologies in particular for existing buildings, like Sabina said, in the US, for example, look at the Chrysler Tower, make him ESG compliant. I'm looking really forward how the Americans going to do this. Things like this is very, very difficult. We have to do it. But what I see is from a technology point of view, it's very difficult to find the right technology to build it into existing buildings. We're not talking about new buildings. Here you can implement everything. I'm sitting on the board of Edge Technologies from Holland. Yes, we're doing all of this. But when you have a 20-year, 30-year-old building, which you bought, you have it in your portfolio, and now it comes to refinancing, we go to Assem, and he says, it's a brown building. We don't want to refinance. Look for somebody else. So this is the challenge. And then you have to take a lot of money in your hand in order to upgrade the building. And it's not only the money, you need the technology. And I'm working with a startup who does the balancing of the water pipes. That's only one solution. I just talked to a Core Plus value add investor, and he said, and the rest. This is the problem. We don't have this kind of integrated solutions to say, so we have this building, we have these features, this needs to be fixed. And this is not available, unfortunately. So it's a patchwork, and then we have the supply chain issue. So where should all this stuff come from now? Even the developers have problems now to construct a new building, to find steel. A client of mine, he wants to finish a building. It's almost finished, and air condition. Material parts of the air condition is not any longer available. So we're looking in all across Europe to find these bits and pieces. So this is the problem, the balancing act the owners have. It's not the unwillingness, it's really the problem to find real solutions.
Okay, Monica, you want to say something?
If I can add, yes. I think if we can actually look into buildings as material banks, whereby you have materials which have some value. We're talking about valuation earlier on. And today, the additional value of materials is not recognized anywhere. So the question really is what and how soon can we rectify that by effectively adopting standards by either the RICS or the accounting standards, etc., that will be recognizing those additional values in valuations, business valuations or property valuations. That's an area that, of course, requires quite a bit of insights, but that's something that can be done relatively quickly if we put our minds to it.
Yeah. Hi. 3 years ago, I have seen a project in Amsterdam Schiphol. There is this circular project with office buildings and urban farm, so that they built like 3 different office buildings, which were planned from the beginning according to the circular economy standards, that they could be demolished, taken away. The steel frame, screwed, not welded, and so on, everything leased, the whole lighting system leased, electricals from Philips, with commitment that they would take it back and reuse. And right next to it, there were 3 office towers belonging to one of German investment funds, pension funds, empty. I mean, there were bushes, and, with some ivy on them, not used for the last 15 years. Local government was trying to get them removed, and the owners wouldn't touch them as they had them on books, of course. And those circular office buildings were designed with 20 years validity, so they were supposed to be taken apart after 20 years. And that raises so many different questions. How do you finance that? How do you value them? I mean, you can't value them on yield anymore, right? There is the residual value, if there is any. Okay, and I don't see any answers whatsoever. It's, I wonder who would finance a project like this, and how would you, put them in the books. It is there already. It's very close to the airport.
Yeah, that sounds quite familiar. I think in terms of approaching the valuation, it's a very key question here because we're looking at various business models of circular economy, including product as a service. So you have parts of the building which are actually leased for a long time. In Holland, you have building structures, steel structures, which are leased for 60 years. And then you've got different layers of buildings which are equally leased for different lengths of time. So yeah, the question is, how do you approach the valuation? And of course, at the end of the day, okay, who owns what? Because that's the key question, really, in terms of the ownership of individual layers of the buildings. So I think there are lots of different questions here to which perhaps we don't have answers as yet. But inevitably, we don't have much in terms of choices because of what we are going to see in terms of scarcity of resources. And how we approach that, bearing in mind that we have issues of supply, building materials, etc. So I think there are a whole host of issues here to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to say, Marcus? Yeah.
Yeah, another takeaway from today is I've heard a lot about the rents will increase.
Well, you just heard it, you didn't hear it. I mean, that's like 20 to 30%.
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward into when we come back in 12 months. I want to see where the rents are, because there is one. I think we missed one point here, which is called economic growth, in order to be able to pay the increased rent. And here I make a bit of a question mark whether this play is gonna. Yeah, if this is going to happen, as everybody today was stressing, I put a question mark on this.
Okay, yeah, I think a big question mark there maybe. But Hadley, you mentioned something earlier you wanted to, because we'll just last 5 or 6 minutes now, unless you have any other points you want to mention. Governance, you seemed very strong and passionate about that, or maybe I misread that.
Well, governance is a word that in, let's say, our part of the world, let's be frank, is a pretty new word. When sort of, let's say, Western Europe has been around for a while. But, what we can see is that now what institutional investors and tenants and pretty much anyone that interacts with your company, they need to see a real clarity of who they can go to if the shit hits the fan. Yeah. And so proper boards, proper structure, proper ESG committees, proper investment committees, these are not a nice to have anymore. If you want, and Poland actually, this is a big area actually, this country needs to kind of really now focus on, it's so close now to attracting some of this beautiful core plus money on a much, much more entrepreneurial level. But if we as industries are not actually understanding and learning what that means, so and what it effectively means is you have to come really like almost a miniature listed company, yeah, and that's how you have to run your business. So when you're setting up your business or looking to restructure it, please don't underestimate how important that will be in this country. And it is already now, but it's like ESG. Pretty much 2 to 3 years ago, very few people have heard of it. In 2 or 3 years' time, there'll be panels, and you'll be talking about governance, not ESG.
My view is, I think there is governance. The problem in most of the companies, what I see, is it's not documented. Yes. And the question is then how the business leaders, the owners, want to run their business. And I've seen, from white to black, I've seen everything. But the majority is really respecting the rules. They have a good governance. But sometimes when you approach them and say, okay, how are we going to operate? Oh yeah, we do it since 20 years like this. Yeah. And I say, well, where is it documented? yeah, do we need to document this? And this is, I think, the mentality. The mentality needs to change in the industry. There is, for sure, there are always the black sheeps, but on average, there is, in my opinion, quite a good governance in the industry. Take aside Wirecard and all these big scandals, yeah. But the problem is really that nobody had a need in the past to write it down. Now there is a need because investors want to see it, and so therefore I'm very optimistic that we will make this much more easy than the E, for example. The S and G, in my opinion, what I see in the different structures I'm active, is not a problem. The E is the problem because we need the technology, we need the money. This is the biggest challenge.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we'll draw the conference to a close.
No. We cannot finish on that. Guys, I mean, we've got to finish on a positive.
How do you want to finish?
We have to finish on a positive. So it is.
I think that's quite positive.
I started it, so but I am a massive. We all are. Let's face it. The next 10 years in Poland and in Central Europe is going to make the last 20 years look like a kindergarten. This is our time. If we get this right, this is our moment. So, we will never see growth. We are 30 years behind from a GDP perspective where Germany is. I believe in the next 5 years, we're going to be 15 years behind. And that is the message I think we need to focus on, because it's so often that you come to conferences and we don't focus on the positives, and there's a necessary reason for it. But, I believe Poland should seriously now look at the Eurozone, to become attractive from a debt perspective, and these are all questions that are being answered. So hopefully, let's look back in 5 years, and we'll all still be here smiling.
Let's hope so. Monica, you want to say?
I just wanted to say that we have a lot of challenges, but we have a massive opportunity. So we just have to make sure that we actually collaborate and join forces, and ensure that we actually bring that massive opportunity to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, one, perspective is everything. We started off this conference with a film showing how Poland, which will surprise people around the world, it always does, and we get used to all this, Warsaw, looking incredibly modern and everything, and people around the world are like, wow, is that Poland? So we got used to it, but if you had said 10 years ago that Russia tragically, murderously would invade Ukraine, and we'd be having a conference like 6 weeks later, as if, it's happened and everything, but where business carries on, I mean, no one would believe you. You would just say, no way, Poland would have been, all the investors would have done a runner, and here we are, and even people are talking about, I mean, this is another, we don't know, a lot of investors, CBRE management, coming in, and that's, I think it's very, we really appreciate this in this region, but there are obviously a lot of investors who are taking a second look and waiting and seeing what happens. But still, you would have expected more to fly. So I think it's incredible that we are actually having this kind of relatively normal conference with a war going on next door, very tragically. So thank you very much, all of you, for coming. I'd like to